They're not really up on what's selling and what the trends are and what their budget should be. And so they just go and, like I said before, just go make the film and then bring it to a distributor or a producer's rep to sell. And at that point, it's like, okay, we can sell it, sometimes, but a lot of times there were minor tweaks you could have done to make it even better and make it more, saleable.
At what stage in the filmmaking process should filmmakers start speaking with a distributor?
So I think early on, I think when you have a concept and you're thinking like, okay, I have a film project that I'm interested in making, I have a story, I want to make this, I'm thinking about this budget level. I think that's the perfect time to start having a conversation and at least gauge the marketplace and say, hey, if I was going to make $1 million film and this is kind of the storyline and this was the cast, like, what do you think just on paper? How does that sound? Most distributors are happy to talk to you about it and give you at least some feedback. And, you'd probably be surprised. Most of the people probably tell you your budget's too high based on, the market today, because it is tough. And they may say your budget's too low. They might say, oh, this is a great concept, but you need, bigger cast. So you need to raise your budget. Instead of $1 million, you should make it for, $3 million and get bigger cast. Or they might even say, oh, this is a fantastic high concept. If you did it at 20 million and you could get some real names, to do it, that could be almost like studio quality. So I think early on, when you have just the elements coming together, is a good time to talk, because I think the sooner you know kind of what you're dealing with and what you're working with, and if all the feedback is really negative at the beginning, you might have to reassess and say, hey, well, maybe I should rethink this a little bit, because maybe I'm not approaching this properly if I want a film that's going to be able to sell or go into distribution.
And then in terms of people that are within the business, how do you think, living in Los Angeles or maybe New York or London or wherever, think that way, whereas people outside of the business, maybe they're not even thinking about distribution?
Yeah, I think, if people are, in a different area and they're not surrounded by the film business and people in the film business, a lot of times, it's usually driven by, one person who says, hey, I want to make a movie. I've got this story idea. I either want to write it or direct it or do both and maybe even star in it. And they will say, hey, let's do it. And they start to build their knowledge base, and they're reading books and listening to, podcasts like yours and everything else and trying to figure it out. But at the same time, there are a lot of resources that would talk to them and people that would help them at least to get a better understanding of it. But so much of that, I think they go and they make these in a vacuum, where they're just insulated from the business. They're not really up on what's selling and what the trends are and what their budget should be. And so they just go and, like I said before, just go make the film and then bring it to a distributor or a producer's rep to sell. And at that point, it's like, okay, we can sell it, sometimes, but a lot of times there were minor tweaks you could have done to make it even better and make it more, saleable.
And what you said just a few segments ago, I believe, is that a lot of these people are successful in other areas of other businesses, and so maybe they think that I can just emulate that and the film industry, and it's all going to work out.
Yeah, and sometimes it works, but I've seen a lot of successful business people humbled by the film business. They get into it, they think it operates under the same principles and the same, kind of things. They might be a master negotiator and they think, oh, I can just negotiate my way into a distribution deal, and then they find out it's very different. And, this business, it is a lot of relationships, but it's a lot of nuance, and you're dealing with, 40 international territories along with the US and Canada. And so everything is a little different. It's not like you've just made a product and can ship it out on Amazon. It's a little bit different, and like I said, it humbles a lot of successful business people from other industries.
Do you think distributors will pay attention to filmmakers who do not have a track record?
Absolutely. That's the one good thing, and I think the film business is getting more democratized now because it's been decentralized. A lot of production now is taking place all over the world. It's not just LA and New York, and unfortunately production's down in LA now, but it's opened up. I mean, the success of foreign language films has opened up new markets, and I think most distributors are willing to at least look at a film, especially a new filmmaker, and see if it's something they want. And even if they don't have a track record, like once you've made the film, it speaks for itself, and it goes into the marketplace. It also sets its own price in the marketplace. So no one cares who you are, what you spent on it, how long it took you to make it or anything. They once it's finished, they look at it as a finished product, and they can assess value, assess what they think it will do in the market, and then judge it on that. So it helps if someone has a track record, because you can maybe apply, maybe they've built a fan base over a few years and they have a core group of fans that really like their previous films, and so you can market to those people for the new film. But at the same time, it happens less, I think, now than it used to. I think back when Miramax and Dimension were kind of buying these interesting films from people like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, you would see these directors kind of burst on the scene, and they would take over, and then they'd do multiple films with those companies. And I think that happens less now. But at the same time, someone could make a small film and it just turns out amazing, and occasionally that happens, and someone will take it and then it'll get into a festival and then people will see it, and they don't really care if they've never made another film, as long as they made a brilliant piece of work.
And then too, hopefully that they don't have a string of bad films behind them. I don't know if that would hurt as well, or
Sometimes.
You're only as good as what you currently are working on.
I mean, I think they give people a fair amount of chances, and I think people that really know film can watch a film and say, oh, this is a bad movie. Like, it's just poorly made. Like, the acting's bad, the script's bad, the lighting's bad, it's shot poorly, the story's not well told. That's like on the craft of filmmaking. And then there's the other side of why films don't work, and that's just, sometimes the commercial side, the distribution side, the marketing, just the wrong film for the wrong time, or, they didn't market it well, or, they put it out on the wrong weekend, or, there was a hurricane on the East Coast and people couldn't get to the theaters to see it. And, so I think people are willing to overlook, something that flops if they can look at it and say, well, they made a nice piece of work, but it just didn't work out in the marketplace. That craft is still there, and so they're more likely to give them another chance. But I think that the business is very forgiving, especially if you've had a hit. It can take several flops for people to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't be working with this person anymore. They don't have the kind of touch anymore. But in general, I think it's project-based, project by project. If you have a great project that everybody wants, they'll say, oh, we had a couple bad misses, but this one is has all the elements to be a success, so we'll take a chance.
Right, yeah. I mean, not to get morbid, but just as sort of these black swan events happen all across the world, and your movie is slated to come out, and it's of no fault of your own, and yeah, that's something that I don't know if we thought about 20 years ago.
Yeah. I worked with Valiant Comics a little bit, and they had a film called Bloodshot with Vin Diesel, which was like their first big push into major motion pictures, and it was a good film. It looked great. Vin Diesel was in it. They had a lot of buzz about it, and then it came out like on the first weekend of COVID. And it got had like basically one weekend in the theaters, and then they had to go to a home like premium VOD release, and it still, I guess, did well, but it didn't have that big theatrical box office that it probably would have had if it had just continued its run.
Right. I can remember David and myself sitting in a empty, huge theater. We were the only two there. Right before lockdown happened. I mean, basically just a few days before, and yeah, and it was a bummer because the movie was great. So that is true. Yeah. Yeah,
things disrupt it, but I think if you made a good film, people can see the quality, and eventually they'll see it. Whether maybe they'll just see it on a streamer now or something, and they can say, "Oh, that person made a really good film." But it is nice if it gets the theatrical attention and awards and everything. But certain events disrupt that, and there's really nothing you can do about it.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.